After she left me in a remote spot, my daughter headed straight to her elegant penthouse, the property that's in my name. I said nothing, and the next day I called a locksmith. 56 missed calls. I stared at my phone screen in the dim light of my cramped apartment, watching Emily's name flash over and over. Each buzz felt like an accusation, a demand, a tantrum. I let every single call go to voicemail, let her sweat, let her panic in that marble-floored palace I'd bought with my retirement savings. Let her wonder, for the first time in her spoiled life, what happens when Mama stops saying yes. The locksmith showed up at 8:30 the next morning. His name was Bill, and he had the look of a man who'd seen every flavor of family drama and stopped asking questions 20 years ago. Thick arms, weathered face, toolbox covered in stickers from places he'd probably never visited. "You're the owner?" he asked, glancing at the building's directory. "I'm the owner," I confirmed, showing him the deed I'd printed out that morning. "My name's on everything. I want every lock changed. Front door, back entrance, the service door in the kitchen, the garage, all of it." Bill nodded slowly, reading the paper. "Your daughter's been living here?" "Was living here. Past tense." He didn't ask anything else, just got to work with his drill and his new lock sets. I stood in the doorway of what used to be Emily's sanctuary and took it all in with fresh eyes. Designer handbags tossed carelessly on the Italian leather sofa. A pair of $1,000 shoes kicked off in the middle of the living room. Empty champagne bottles lined up on the kitchen counter like trophies. Wedding photos everywhere, blown up to ridiculous sizes, each one a reminder of 6 days ago. 6 days since the worst moment of my life. The wedding had been at the Riverside Hotel, 300 guests, a $250,000 budget that Emily and her new husband Derek had somehow convinced me to split with them. They'd promised it would be tasteful, elegant, a celebration of family. What I got instead was a public humiliation that still made my hands shake when I thought about it. The ceremony had been fine. Emily looked beautiful in her dress, a waterfall of silk and lace that cost more than my first car. Derek stood at the altar in his custom tuxedo, looking every inch the successful businessman he pretended to be. I sat in the front row, watching my daughter promise to love and cherish this man I barely knew, this man she'd been dating for only 18 months. The reception was when everything fell apart. Emily had pulled me aside between the salad course and the entree, her smile bright and fake. Derek stood beside her, one hand possessive on her waist. "Mom, we need to talk about the apartment," Emily said, loud enough that nearby tables could hear. "What about it?" "Derek and I have been discussing it, and we think it makes more sense for the keys to be in my name, officially, since I'm the one actually living there." I felt my stomach drop. "Emily, we've talked about this. The apartment is mine. You're welcome to stay there, but I'm not transferring ownership." "I'm not asking you to transfer ownership," she said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone I knew too well. "Just give me the spare keys, all of them. It's weird that you can just walk in whenever you want." "I've never walked in without calling first." "But you could, and now that I'm married, Derek and I need our privacy, so just hand over the keys, okay? It's not a big deal." People were listening, sensing drama. "No," I said quietly. "The apartment is my property. I'm not giving you full access without me having keys too. That's not how this works." Emily's face flushed red. "Are you serious right now? You're going to embarrass me at my own wedding?" "I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, I'm just not comfortable." "Give me the goddamn keys, Mom." The room went silent. 300 people stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped pretending they weren't watching us. "Emily, please, let's discuss this later." "No, now. Give them to me now." I stood up, trying to keep my voice level, trying to maintain some dignity. "No. I'm sorry. But no." That's when she slapped me. The sound cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, my cheek erupting in hot pain. For a moment, everything froze. Emily's hand still raised, my face burning, 300 faces staring in shock. Then Derek smiled. Just a small curl of his lips, there and gone, but I saw it. I turned and walked out. Left my purse, left my coat, left the remains of my dignity scattered across that ballroom floor. Got in my car and drove home in my formal dress, my face throbbing, tears streaming down my cheeks. Emily called that night. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was stressed. The wedding, everything, I just snapped. You know I didn't mean it." I hung up without speaking. She called again the next morning. "Mom, come on, don't be dramatic. It was just a little slap. You're acting like I beat you up or something." I hung up again. By the third call, her tone had changed. "Fine, be that way, but I still need those keys. Derek and I are going to be away for 2 weeks on our honeymoon, and when we get back, I expect this to be resolved." That's when I called the locksmith. Bill finished the last lock just after noon, handing me 3 new sets of keys. "All done. Old locks are in my truck. Want me to toss them?" "Please." I paid him in cash, added a $50 tip for his discretion, and watched him pack up his equipment. When he drove away, I stood alone in the center of the penthouse, feeling the silence settle around me like a blanket. My phone buzzed. "Emily." I answered this time. "What did you do?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. "I just tried my key and it doesn't work. Mom, what did you do?" "I changed the locks on my property." "You can't do that." "I just did. All my stuff is in there. My clothes, my jewelry, everything. Then you should have thought about that before you assaulted me in front of 300 people. "I didn't assault you. God, you're so dramatic." "You slapped me, Emily. Hard. In public. Because I wouldn't give you keys to an apartment that I own, that I bought with my own money, that I've let you live in rent-free for 3 years. You want dramatic? Try explaining to your wedding guests why the mother of the bride left with a handprint on her face." Silence. Then, quieter. "Derek said you were being unreasonable." Something cold settled in my chest. "Derek, of course. How long has Derek been pushing you to get those keys, Emily?" "That's not... You don't understand. We're married now. We're a team. And he thinks... I don't care what Derek thinks. Derek doesn't own this property. Derek doesn't get a say, and neither do you anymore. Mom, you made your choice at that wedding. You chose Derek over me. You chose to humiliate me, to physically attack me, to treat me like I'm an obstacle instead of your mother. Fine. You got what you wanted. Now deal with the consequences." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I sat down on Emily's expensive sofa, surrounded by her expensive things, and let myself feel it. The hurt, the betrayal, the searing, bitter rage that had been building for 6 days. My daughter had hit me. My daughter had chosen a man she barely knew over the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for her private school, who'd sacrificed everything to give her the life she wanted. My phone buzzed with a text. Derek this time. "This is ridiculous. Emily is having a panic attack. Be an adult and give her the keys back." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Tell Emily she has 30 days to remove her belongings. After that, everything gets donated." His response came immediately. "You're making a huge mistake." I turned off my phone. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Margaret Henderson and Associates with a folder full of documents and a check for $5,000. Margaret had handled my divorce 15 years ago, back when Emily's father decided he wanted a younger model and left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. She'd taken him for everything he had left, gotten me full custody, and set me up with a support order that actually got paid. I trusted her. "Janet," Margaret said, rising from behind her massive oak desk to shake my hand. Her office looked exactly the same as it had all those years ago. Floor-to-ceiling law books, windows overlooking the city, framed degrees covering one wall. "I was surprised to get your call. What's going on?" I sat down and told her everything. The wedding, the slap, Emily's entitlement, the apartment situation. Margaret listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned back. You want to evict your own daughter. I want to reclaim my property. Emily has been living there without paying rent, without a lease, without contributing anything for 3 years. She assaulted me when I wouldn't give her complete control. I want her out. Do you have proof of the assault? I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. One of the wedding guests, a cousin I barely knew, had filmed the whole thing before realizing it was inappropriate and deleting it from her social media, but not before I'd saved a copy. The footage was crystal clear, Emily demanding the keys, me refusing, her hand connecting with my face with enough force to turn my head. Margaret watched it twice, her expression unreadable. This changes things, she said. With video evidence of assault, we can expedite the eviction process. Normally, she'd be entitled to 30 days minimum, but given the circumstances, I think we can argue for immediate removal with supervised access to retrieve belongings. How fast can you make this happen? I'll file the paperwork today. With the video evidence and the fact that she's been living there without a lease or rent payments, I'd estimate 2 weeks until we have a court order. Maybe less. What will this cost me? $5,000 retainer. Could run higher if she contests it, but honestly, Janet, she doesn't have much ground to stand on. You own the property. She has no lease, no tenancy agreement, and she assaulted you. This is about as clear-cut as evictions get. I wrote the check without hesitation. Do it. Margaret smiled, the kind of smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Consider it done. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in a week. For 3 years, I'd let Emily take advantage of me. Free housing, free utilities, free everything while she lived her Instagram-perfect life, and I scraped by in my 1-bedroom rental. I'd told myself I was being supportive, being a good mother. But somewhere along the way, support had turned into enabling, and Emily had turned into someone I didn't recognize. My phone rang. Emily again. I answered, feeling bold. You need to stop this, she said. No hello, no preamble. Derek talked to his lawyer, and they said what you're doing is illegal. Derek's lawyer is wrong. I own the property. You have no lease. You're what's legally called a tenant at will, which means I can terminate your tenancy at any time for any reason. You can't just kick me out. I can, and I am. My lawyer is filing eviction papers today. You'll be served within 48 hours. I suggest you start packing. Mom, please. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Emily. Maybe Derek's place? Oh, wait, he doesn't have one, does he? He moved into my apartment with you. Funny how that worked out. You're being cruel. I'm being fair. You hit me. You disrespected me. You've been using me for years, and I let it happen because I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do, but I'm done. Find somewhere else to live. I hung up before she could respond. That afternoon, I went to my bank and made some changes. Emily had been an authorized user on my checking account since college, something I'd set up so she could handle emergencies when she was away at school. I'd never removed her, never thought I needed to. That was about to change. I want to remove Emily Patterson as an authorized user, I told the bank manager, a pleasant woman named Sandra who I'd been working with for a decade. Immediately. Sandra pulled up my account, clicked through a few screens. I can do that right now. May I ask why? Just for our records. Family dispute. I don't want her to have access to my funds anymore. Understood. Let me just... Sandra's expression changed. Oh. What? Ms. Patterson, have you checked your account recently? My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Sandra turned her monitor to face me. The screen showed my transaction history for the past week. Transfer after transfer, each one for several $1,000s, all going to accounts I didn't recognize. When did these happen? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Over the past 5 days. They started the day after that wedding date you have marked in your calendar. Total of $37,000 across 6 transactions. I couldn't breathe. $37,000, my savings, my retirement fund, everything I'd been carefully building for the past 15 years. Who authorized these? Sandra checked the details. Emily Patterson. She has authorization on your account, so from the bank's perspective, these are legitimate transactions. But I didn't approve them. I understand, but legally, an authorized user has the right to make transactions. That's what the authorization means. So she can just steal from me, and it's legal? Sandra's expression was sympathetic. It's not technically theft if she had authorization. However, you can report this as fraud. The bank will investigate, and if we determine the transactions were unauthorized, she had authorization because I gave it to her 10 years ago for emergencies. This isn't an emergency, this is theft. I understand your frustration, Ms. Patterson. Let me get you the forms for a fraud claim. We'll freeze your account immediately and open an investigation. But I have to be honest with you, these cases can take months to resolve, and there's no guarantee you'll recover the funds. I filled out the forms in a daze. $37,000. Gone. Stolen by my own daughter. When I finished with the bank, I drove straight to the police station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement was young, probably fresh out of the academy, and he looked distinctly uncomfortable. Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. Financial crimes between family members are very difficult to prosecute, especially when the accused had legal authorization to access the account. But she stole from me. I understand, but from a legal standpoint, she was an authorized user. That means she had permission to make transactions. Proving that she acted with criminal intent rather than just poor judgment is extremely difficult. So she gets away with it? I didn't say that. We'll investigate, but you should know that most of these cases end up in civil court rather than criminal court. Your best option is probably to sue her for the money. I left the police station feeling hollowed out. Emily hadn't just taken my money. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running the numbers in my head. $37,000 gone. 3 years of free rent, easily another $72,000 if I calculated market rates. The wedding costs I'd split, another $60,000. Add it all up, and my daughter had cost me nearly $200,000 over the past 3 years. $200,000 that I'd never get back. At 3 in the morning, I got up and made a list. Everything I knew about Emily and Derek. Their friends, their business contacts, their social media connections. Derek's job, his background, his history. I realized I knew almost nothing about my son-in-law. He'd appeared in Emily's life 18 months ago, and I'd accepted him at face value because Emily seemed happy. What if that had been a mistake? I opened my laptop and started searching. Derek Sutherland. Common name, lots of results. I added San Francisco, since that's where Emily said he was from. More results, but nothing useful. Then I tried Derek Sutherland fraud, just to see, and found something. A news article from 3 years ago. A lawsuit in Oregon. A woman named Amanda Pritchard claiming her ex-husband Derek Sutherland had defrauded her of over $100,000 during their marriage. The case had been settled out of court, details sealed. I kept searching, found another lawsuit, different woman. Rachel Thompson in Nevada. Similar claims, settled, out of court. Derek had been married before, twice. Both marriages had ended in accusations of financial fraud, and now he'd married my daughter. I picked up my phone and called a number I'd hoped I'd never need again. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. This better be important. It's 3 in the morning. Jack, I said. It's Janet Patterson. I need your help. Jack Morrison had been a cop for 25 years before retiring and starting his own private investigation business. He'd helped me gather evidence during my divorce, found out about my ex-husband's affairs and hidden assets. He was expensive, discreet, and very, very good. Janet, what's wrong? I told him everything. The wedding, the slap, the stolen money, and what I'd found about Derek's past. Jack was quiet for a long moment. You think your daughter married a con artist. I think my daughter married a con artist and she's either his victim or his accomplice. I need to know which. This is going to cost you. How much? 2,000 retainer. Could run higher depending on what I find. I thought about my depleted bank account, the missing 37,000. Do it. I'll start first thing tomorrow. Or today, technically. Get some sleep, Janet. Jack? How fast can you work? Give me a week. I'll find out everything there is to know about Derek Sutherland. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Jack's voice was steady as he made the call, his words sharp and decisive. He was laying out the final pieces of the puzzle, arranging everything for the confrontation that would soon follow. I could hear him speaking to someone on the other end of the line, confirming meetings, arranging times and places. Each click of the phone, each word exchanged, pushed me closer to something I wasn't sure I could handle. I could hardly recognize her in the images. The girl I had raised seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone willing to betray everything she once held dear, including me. Jack hung up the phone and turned back to me, his face serious. The ball's rolling, Janet. It won't be long before the authorities take action. Once they do, it'll be out of your hands. I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere, spinning with the consequences. Emily, my daughter. How could she be capable of this? The thought kept swirling in my head, refusing to settle. There was a part of me, an undeniable part, that wanted to deny it all, that wanted to think there had been some mistake, some misunderstanding, some way out. But the evidence was irrefutable. She had chosen this path. She had willingly walked down it. I'm ready, I said, my voice colder than I felt. Whatever it takes, we stop them now. Jack's eyes softened briefly, but only for a moment. He was a professional. He had seen this kind of thing before. He knew what was at stake. I could see it in the way he carefully packed the folder back into his bag, the meticulous care with which he handled the evidence. You've done everything right so far, he said, standing up. Now, it's time to let the law do its job. I watched him walk out, feeling an odd emptiness settle over me. The anticipation of what was about to happen left me feeling like I was on the edge of a precipice. And it was all my doing. I had chosen to follow this path, to expose her, to make sure she paid for what she'd done. I stared at the photographs of her, the girl I had once known. I had to remember, though. I had to remind myself of why I was doing this. She wasn't the victim. She had made the choices. She had knowingly helped a con man destroy the lives of so many others, including my own. And now it was time for her to face the consequences of those choices. The next few days passed in a blur. Jack worked behind the scenes, pulling strings, setting up the meetings, while I wrestled with the gnawing feeling of betrayal that wouldn't let go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. I heard her voice. The anger, the screaming, the accusations. I didn't know how to reconcile the girl I had raised with the woman she had become. I avoided my apartment as much as possible, spending more time in my office, and when I did go home, I kept the blinds closed, the doors locked, always feeling like someone was watching. And maybe they were. Derek and Emily had no idea I was onto them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer, that they could be waiting for the right moment to strike. Jack's warnings rang in my ears every time I stepped out of the building. Vary your routine. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't confront them directly. I followed his advice, parking in different spots, changing my path to and from work. Every time I thought I saw a familiar face, I would turn and walk in the opposite direction, my pulse racing. I was living in a constant state of vigilance, my heart always a few beats ahead of my mind. Then, on the fourth day after Jack's call, the meeting was set. It was with the FBI. I had never been inside an FBI office before, but it was exactly as I had imagined: cold, sterile, efficient. The agent who greeted me was a tall woman with sharp eyes wearing a dark blue suit. She introduced herself as Special Agent Marissa Doyle, and after a quick handshake, we walked to a small conference room in the back. I sat down at the table across from her, my heart pounding in my chest. I had already been through the evidence once, twice, 3 times. I knew what was coming, but the reality of it all, the impending investigation, the government's involvement, the irrevocable shift in my life, made it feel like it was all happening to someone else. "Ms. Patterson," Agent Doyle began, sitting across from me, "we've reviewed everything Mr. Morrison has provided us, and I can tell you, you've done exactly what we need. We have enough evidence to move forward." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happens now?" "We'll begin by securing warrants for the properties involved. We'll seize any assets connected to the fraud and trace the ownership of the shell companies. Our first priority is preventing them from accessing any more of your property or assets." "What about Emily and Derek?" I asked, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. "They'll be arrested. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement to apprehend them both. They'll be charged with property fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and several counts of identity theft. Given the scale of the operation, the penalties are severe." I swallowed hard. "How long will it take?" "It could take a few days to set everything in motion, but once the arrests are made, things will move quickly. If they're convicted, they'll both be facing decades in prison." I thought of Emily, of her tear-streaked face as she screamed in the courtroom, begging me to stop the sentence. "What about her?" I asked quietly. "Is there any chance?" Agent Doyle's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Unfortunately, the evidence against her is strong. She was an active participant in this fraud, and she knew exactly what she was doing. There's no way to spin it otherwise." My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to tell Agent Doyle she was wrong. But I knew she wasn't. My daughter had made her choices, and she was going to have to face them. "What happens to Derek?" I asked, trying to push past the pain. "He'll be arrested as well. He's been running cons for years, as you know. His record will make things easier for us. He'll be charged with everything he's done, and given the scale of his crimes, he won't be getting out anytime soon." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of finality settling over me. This was happening. There was no turning back now. "We'll keep you informed," Agent Doyle said, standing up. "If you hear from either of them, or if you notice anything unusual, don't hesitate to call." I stood up, my legs weak beneath me. "Thank you," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "Take care, Ms. Patterson," she said, offering me a small, understanding smile. I walked out of the office, the weight of what I had just done settling in my bones. It was over. They were going to be stopped. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the end of something I couldn't quite name. And that evening Jack called me again. The tone in his voice was more urgent this time. "They're planning something. Derek and Emily, they know we're onto them. I'm not sure what, but they're going to make a move soon." I gripped the phone tighter, my breath catching in my throat. "What do we do?" "Stay alert. Keep your distance. Don't engage, and don't trust anyone." "I won't," I said, my voice trembling. As I hung up, I knew what I had to do. I had done everything I could to protect myself, to make sure my life wouldn't be destroyed. But I also knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them win. Not now. Not ever. The FBI field office was in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. I met with Special Agent Catherine Walsh and her partner, Agent Michael Torres. They sat across from me in a sterile conference room, recording equipment on the table between us, while I told them everything. Catherine was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional. She listened without interrupting as I walked through the timeline, occasionally making notes on her tablet. Torres was younger, quieter, but I could see his mind working as I talked. When I finished, Catherine leaned back in her chair. "Ms. Patterson, What you're describing is a complex fraud operation. Before we proceed, I need to make sure you understand the implications. If we investigate this and find evidence of criminal activity, everyone involved will be prosecuted, including your daughter. I understand. Emily could face substantial prison time. Wire fraud, property fraud, identity theft, these are serious federal crimes. We're talking 5 to 10 years minimum, possibly more depending on what else we find. I understand, I repeated. Catherine and Torres exchanged a glance. Okay, Catherine said. Show us what you have. I opened Jack Morrison's folder and spread the contents across the conference table. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers, property records with forged signatures, photographs of Emily and Derek meeting with known criminals, background checks on Derek showing his pattern of marrying and defrauding women, statements from his ex-wives detailing their experiences. Catherine and Torres spent an hour reviewing everything, asking questions, cross-referencing documents. When they finished, Catherine looked at me with something like respect. Ms. Patterson, you've essentially done our job for us. This is prosecution-ready evidence. You could have just handed this to a local DA, but I'm glad you came to us. This is definitely federal jurisdiction. What happens now? We open a formal investigation. This will take time, probably 6 to 8 months. We'll need to coordinate with various agencies, trace the money through offshore accounts, build an airtight case. During that time, you cannot let Derek or Emily know we're investigating. No confrontations, no accusations, nothing that would tip them off. Can you freeze their accounts? Stop them from stealing more? Not yet. If we move too early, they'll know we're on to them and they'll run. We need to let them think they're safe, let them continue with their plans. The more they do, the stronger our case becomes. So, I just wait while they plot to destroy my life? Torres spoke for the first time. We'll be watching them. If they make a move to actually transfer property or take out fraudulent loans, we'll intervene before any damage is done. But we need them to take concrete steps. Conspiracy to commit fraud is harder to prove than actual fraud. How much danger am I in? Catherine's expression turned serious. Honestly? Some. Derek has a history of violence when cornered. Nothing provable, but his ex-wives all reported threats, intimidation. You should take precautions. Vary your routine, install security cameras, let friends and neighbors know you're concerned about harassment. If Derek or Emily approach you directly, call 911 immediately. I left the FBI office feeling both empowered and terrified. The wheels of justice were turning, but slowly. Too slowly. In the meantime, I was living in the crosshairs of 2 criminals who wanted to steal everything I had. That night, I installed cameras around my apartment, motion activated, feeding to an app on my phone. I changed all my passwords again, set up alerts on my credit reports, put fraud freezes on all my accounts. I told my landlord about the situation, asked him to be aware of anyone asking about me or trying to access my apartment. I became vigilant in a way I'd never been before. Checked my rearview mirror constantly, parked in different spots each day, took different routes to work, lived like I was being hunted, because I was. The eviction went through exactly 2 weeks after Margaret filed the paperwork. The judge reviewed the evidence, watched the video of Emily slapping me, and granted the order immediately. Emily had 30 days to remove all her belongings from the penthouse. She called me within an hour of being served, her voice pure venom. You're really doing this? You're really kicking me out onto the street? You have plenty of money to find a new place. Oh wait, you spent it all. My money that you stole. That wasn't stealing, that was theft, Emily. The police agree. The FBI agrees. The only question is whether you'll be prosecuted for it. Silence. Then, what do you mean the FBI? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Exactly what I said. Think about your choices, Emily. Think about what you've been planning with Derek, and think about whether it's worth going to prison for. I hung up. My phone rang immediately. I ignored it. It rang again and again. And again. Emily, then Derek, then Emily, again. I blocked both their numbers. That night, my security cameras caught Derek trying to break into my apartment. He didn't succeed, the locks held, but I called 911 anyway. The police arrived in minutes, but Derek was gone. They took a report, told me to call if he came back, and left. Catherine Walsh called me the next morning. "We saw Derek at your place last night. Our surveillance team has been watching him." "You've been watching?" "Since the day after you came in. Derek and Emily are under constant surveillance. We know everywhere they go, everyone they meet, every transaction they make. Last night's incident is now part of our case. Attempted breaking and entering, harassment, stalking. Derek's digging himself deeper with every move." "When will you arrest them?" "Soon. They're meeting with Martin Reeves tomorrow, the real estate broker. We believe they're going to finalize the property fraud scheme. Once they take concrete steps to forge documents or transfer ownership, we'll move in." "How long have I been under surveillance?" Catherine hesitated. "Since the day you came to us, we needed to make sure you were safe, and we needed to see if Derek would make any moves against you, which he did. You've been very helpful, Ms. Patterson, even if you didn't know it." I spent the next day in a fog of anxiety and anticipation. My daughter would be arrested soon. Tomorrow, maybe. Or the day after. The FBI was closing in, and Emily had no idea. Part of me felt guilty. She was still my daughter, still the little girl I'd raised alone, still the baby I'd held in my arms 35 years ago. But that little girl was gone. In her place was a criminal who'd planned to destroy me. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning, 3 days after Derek tried to break into my apartment. Catherine called me at 7 a.m. "We have them, both in custody. They were at Reeves's office with forged property documents when we moved in. Derek and Emily are being processed now, Reeves too. We also arrested Lisa Hahn, the banker, and 2 other associates. The whole operation is shut down." I sat down heavily on my couch. "What happens now?" "They'll be arraigned this afternoon. Bail will probably be denied given the flight risk and the offshore accounts. They'll remain in federal custody until trial." "When will that be?" 6 months, maybe 8. Federal cases take time. But, Ms. Patterson, you should know that the evidence is overwhelming. They're going to be convicted. Emily is looking at 7 to 10 years. Derek is looking at 15 to 20. 7 to 10 years. My daughter would be in prison until she was 45 years old. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You did the right thing," Catherine said. "Emily and Derek would have destroyed you financially. You stopped them. You should be proud." I hung up and sat in the silence of my apartment, trying to feel proud, trying to feel anything other than hollow. The trial took 9 months to arrive. 9 months of pre-trial motions, plea bargain negotiations that went nowhere, and media attention I didn't want. The local news picked up the story. Mother turns in daughter for elaborate fraud scheme. My face was on television, my name in newspapers. Reporters called constantly. I changed my phone number twice. Emily and Derek remained in federal detention. No bail, too much flight risk. I didn't visit, didn't write, didn't respond to Emily's letters begging me to drop the charges, to recant my testimony, to save her. I couldn't save her. She'd made her choices. The trial itself was a media circus. The courtroom was packed every day with reporters, curious onlookers, and victims. Amanda Pritchard flew in from Portland. Rachel Thompson came from Las Vegas. Karen Shaw drove down from Chicago. Michelle Burton arrived from Phoenix. All 4 of Derek's ex-wives ready to testify about how he'd destroyed their lives. I sat in the front row every day watching Emily and Derek at the defense table. Emily looked terrible. She'd lost weight in detention. Her hair was limp and greasy, her eyes hollow. She cried constantly, quietly, tears streaming down her face while her lawyer argued for her innocence. Derek looked angry. No tears from him, just cold fury directed at me, at the prosecutors, at the world that had finally caught him. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Day after day, they presented evidence, bank records showing fraudulent transfers, testimony from Jack Morrison about the surveillance operation, statements from Martin Reeves, who'd taken a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Derek and Emily. He described in detail how they'd planned to forge my signature on property transfer documents, how they'd intended to mortgage my properties and disappear with the money. The FBI agents testified about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the elaborate paper trail Derek and Emily had created. Financial experts walked the jury through each transaction, each forged document, each lie. Amanda Pritchard took the stand on day 4. She was composed, professional, devastating. She described meeting Derek, falling in love, getting married. Then the financial abuse started. Joint accounts emptied, credit cards maxed out, a second mortgage taken out on her house without her knowledge. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd taken everything, Amanda said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. $130,000, my retirement savings, my home equity, everything. And then he left. Just disappeared one day while I was at work. I came home to an empty house and empty bank accounts. Did you press charges? The prosecutor asked. I tried, but Derek was careful. Everything was in joint accounts or co-signed. The police said it was a civil matter, not criminal. I had no recourse. And now you see him sitting at that defense table, married to another woman, having done the same thing to her and planning to do it to her mother. How does that make you feel? Emily's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. Vindicated, Amanda said, looking directly at Derek. Finally, someone is holding him accountable. Rachel Thompson's testimony was similar. So was Karen Shaw's and Michelle Burton's. 4 women, 4 nearly identical stories. Derek's pattern was undeniable. On day 7, I was called to testify. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like water. The bailiff swore me in, and I sat down, facing the packed courtroom. Emily was crying again. Derek stared at me with pure hatred. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Foster, approached with a gentle smile. Ms. Patterson, can you please state your relationship to the defendants? Emily Patterson is my daughter. Derek Sutherland is her husband. Can you describe your relationship with Emily prior to March of last year? I took a deep breath. I thought we had a good relationship. I supported her financially, emotionally. I paid for her education, let her live rent-free in a property I owned. I believed I was being a good mother. When did that change? At her wedding. She demanded I give her complete control over my property. When I refused, she slapped me in front of 300 guests. Diana played the video for the jury. In the silent courtroom, the sound of Emily's hand hitting my face was shockingly loud. Several jurors winced. What happened after the wedding, Ms. Patterson? I walked through everything. The changed locks, the stolen money, discovering Derek's history, finding out about the fraud scheme. Diana showed me document after document, asking me to identify them, confirm their authenticity. Bank statements, property records, emails Jack had recovered. Ms. Patterson, when you discovered what your daughter and her husband were planning, what did you do? I went to the FBI. Why not just confront Emily directly? Because I realized my daughter wasn't a victim. She was a criminal, and criminals need to face justice even if they're family. Emily sobbed loudly at that. The judge asked her to control herself. Diana showed me one more document. Do you recognize this? It was a property transfer form for my rental property, dated 6 months before the wedding. My signature at the bottom, transferring ownership to one of Derek and Emily's shell companies. That's not my signature, I said. I never signed that document. I never authorized any transfer. A handwriting expert has confirmed that signature is forged. Ms. Patterson, if this fraud had succeeded, what would you have lost? Everything. The apartment, the rental property, my investment accounts. They'd already stolen $37,000 from my checking account. If the FBI hadn't stopped them, I'd have lost close to $1 million in total assets and been left with massive debt from fraudulent mortgages. One final question. Do you believe your daughter knew what she was doing? I looked directly at Emily. She was staring at me, pleading with her eyes, silently begging me to save her. Yes, I said clearly. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was an active, willing participant in every aspect of this fraud. Emily's lawyer, a slick man named Robert Gaines, tried to tear me apart on cross-examination. Ms. Patterson, isn't it true that you were angry about the wedding incident? Yes. Angry enough to want revenge on your daughter? I wanted justice, not revenge. Justice or revenge? What's the difference, really? You had your own daughter arrested, charged with federal crimes. That seems pretty vengeful to me. My daughter committed federal crimes. I reported them to the appropriate authorities. That's not revenge. That's being a responsible citizen. A responsible citizen? Or a vindictive mother who couldn't forgive one mistake? It wasn't one mistake, I said, feeling my anger rise. It was a calculated year-long plan to defraud me of everything I owned. It was theft, forgery, conspiracy. Those aren't mistakes. Those are choices. But she's your daughter? Don't you love her? I did love her. I'm not sure I know her anymore. So you're willing to send your own child to prison? I leaned forward. My child sent herself to prison when she decided to become a criminal. I just made sure she got caught. Gaines backed off, having lost that exchange badly. The prosecution rested after 2 weeks. The defense tried to mount a case, but there wasn't much they could do. Derek didn't testify. Emily did, sobbing through her testimony, claiming she'd been manipulated by Derek, that she didn't understand what was happening, that she'd thought everything was legal. Diana Foster destroyed her on cross-examination, showing email after email where Emily had discussed the fraud in explicit detail, had made suggestions, had actively participated in planning. There was no way to claim ignorance. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, their faces were grim. The foreperson stood. On the count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how do you find the defendant Derek Sutherland? Guilty. On the count of wire fraud? Guilty. On the count of property fraud? Guilty. Down the list they went. 27 counts against Derek, guilty on every single one. Then Emily's verdict. On the count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how do you find the defendant Emily Patterson? Guilty. Emily collapsed, wailing. Her lawyer caught her before she hit the floor. The bailiffs moved in, but the foreperson kept reading. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 21 counts, 21 guilty verdicts. Derek sat stone-faced, staring straight ahead. Emily was hyperventilating, gasping for air. The judge called a recess, and they were led away. I sat in the courtroom long after everyone else had left, listening to the silence. My daughter was a convicted felon. The days after that phone call blurred together, and I found myself stuck in a pattern of alternating between numbness and fleeting moments of emotion. Each morning I woke. The weight of the reality that my daughter was in prison settled back over me like a heavy fog. The ache in my chest was constant. But so was the guilt. There were still times when I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe Emily, my little girl, had gone so far. She was still so young. She should have been the one to learn from my mistakes, not to make them. But then the logical part of me reminded me that Emily had made her choices, and as painful as it was, I had made mine. I had turned her in, knowing the consequences. But what other choice had I had? I had to stop her before she could hurt anyone else, before she could destroy her life beyond repair. I hadn't heard from her again. The silence from her side was almost a relief, though it also felt like a betrayal. She was out there somewhere, serving her sentence. And I was here, still picking up the pieces of a life that had been shattered. I spent most of my days in a haze, walking through the motions but never really living. The apartment felt empty without Emily. Her absence was like a void I couldn't fill, even though I was surrounded by friends, by people who cared about me, people like Amanda. She'd been there for me, unrelenting in her support, even when I couldn't find it within myself to reach out. It was late one evening when I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an old photo album. I hadn't looked at the pictures in years, but tonight something had driven me to it. The picture on top was from Emily's high school graduation. She was smiling so brightly, her future ahead of her. I could see the innocence in her face, the same innocence that had been destroyed so thoroughly over the past year. The weight of it hit me all over again, the sharp pain of knowing how much she had lost, how much we both had lost. I closed the album with a sigh, feeling the heaviness press down on my chest. My phone buzzed, breaking the quiet. I picked it up instinctively, hoping it was some distraction, some small connection to the outside world. It was a text from Amanda. "I'm coming by tomorrow. We need to talk. I'll bring coffee." I stared at the message for a long moment. I wasn't sure I was ready to talk about anything. I wasn't sure there was anything left to say, but I also knew I couldn't hide from the truth forever. I couldn't keep avoiding it, pretending it wasn't happening. Amanda had been patient with me, but even she could see how far I had pulled away. The next morning, Amanda showed up just as she'd promised, carrying a large cup of coffee in each hand. I didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine, so I didn't. I just let her in, and we sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Amanda," I finally said, my voice rough. "I don't know how to live with what I've done, with what she's done." "You can't keep punishing yourself for this, Elle," Amanda replied softly, her voice calm but firm. "You made the right choice. The only choice, really." I shook my head, staring down at my hands. "I don't know anymore. I thought it was the right thing, but now I'm not sure. I can't just forget what happened. I can't forget what she did." "You don't have to forget, Ella," Amanda said, setting her cup down and looking me squarely in the eyes. "But you can forgive yourself. You can find peace with what happened. You have to." I laughed bitterly. "Forgive myself? After everything? After turning my own daughter in, sending her to prison?" Amanda's eyes softened. "You didn't have a choice. You tried to save her, but you couldn't. She made her choices, Elle. She chose this path. And well, you're still here. You've lost so much, but you haven't lost yourself." "I don't feel like I have myself anymore," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I feel like a stranger. This person sitting here, talking to you. She's not the person I was before. I'm not the same person." "I know," Amanda said gently, "but you're still here. And you're stronger than you think. You have to believe that." I looked at her, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. What if I can't forgive her? What if I can never look at her the same way again? "You don't have to forgive her right now. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," Amanda replied. "But you can start healing, Elle. You can start to find your way back. I promise you, it's not too late." I wiped my eyes, taking a deep breath. Amanda was right. I didn't have to forgive Emily today, or tomorrow, or even next year, but I had to forgive myself. I had to find a way to live again, to breathe without the constant ache. "I don't know where to start," I whispered, more to myself than to Amanda. "Start with you," she said, squeezing my hand. "Start with taking care of yourself. You've been through hell. It's time to begin healing." The silence stretched between us, but this time it wasn't so heavy. I still didn't know how to fix the broken parts of me, but maybe I didn't need to know right now. Maybe I just needed to take it one step at a time. Maybe the healing would come, slowly, in pieces. Amanda stayed for a while longer, talking with me, distracting me from the dark thoughts that had been gnawing at me. She reminded me of things I had almost forgotten, like how I used to love painting, how I used to lose myself in the brushstrokes, the way the colors would come alive under my hands. She told me to start again, that I didn't have to have it all figured out. I just needed to find something to focus on. When she finally left, I sat in the quiet apartment, staring at the empty walls. The air didn't feel as heavy as it had before. Maybe it wasn't much, but it was something. A small flicker of light in the darkness. Later that night, I received another phone call. This time, it wasn't from Emily. It was from Warden Delgado. "Ms. Patterson," she said, her tone firm but compassionate. "I wanted to inform you that your daughter is scheduled for a transfer. She's being moved to a new facility next week." I nodded, though I knew she couldn't see me. "Where to?" "FCI Tallahassee. It's a medium security facility. It's a step up for her. She's been cooperative, and this is part of her rehabilitation process. I wanted to let you know in case you wanted to contact her." I felt a pang in my chest. I hadn't contacted her. Hadn't written, hadn't called. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. "Thank you for letting me know," I said softly. "I'll think about it." "Take your time, Ms. Patterson," Warden Delgado said. "But if you ever want to speak to her, the option will be there." I hung up and sat in the silence again. Emily was still my daughter, locked away behind those walls. But that was all she was now, a part of my past, a part of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive her or myself, but I knew one thing for sure. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. It might never be easy. But I had to keep moving forward, for me, for the person I still hoped I could become, and maybe someday for Emily too. 3 years have passed since the trial. I sold the penthouse for $600,000, made a nice profit, used some of it to pay off my legal fees, put the rest in a retirement account that's now locked down tighter than Fort Knox. The rental property stayed in my name after the FBI helped me reverse the fraudulent transfer. I eventually sold that too, didn't want the hassle of being a landlord anymore. With the money from both properties, I bought a small house on 3 acres outside the city. Nothing fancy, just a ranch-style home with a big yard and an even bigger garden. I'd never had space for a garden before. Now I have room for tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, herbs. I plant in spring, tend through summer, harvest in fall. Simple, honest work that requires nothing but time and attention. I retired from my job at the accounting firm. 59 years old, decent pension, enough savings now to live comfortably. I spend my days reading, gardening, taking long walks on the trails near my house. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a mutt named Cooper who follows me everywhere and doesn't care about my past. It's a quiet life, maybe too quiet sometimes. But it's mine, and nobody's taking it from me. Emily sends letters occasionally. I read them now, though I didn't for the first year. They've changed over time. The early ones were angry, accusatory, full of blame. Then they became pleading, begging for money for the commissary, asking me to hire a lawyer to appeal her sentence, demanding I visit. I never responded to those, but about 6 months ago, the tone shifted. The letters became shorter, more reflective. Less about what I owed her and more about what she'd done. Not quite apologies, but acknowledgments at least. The most recent letter arrived last week. "Mom, I've been in prison for 3 years now. I have 9 more to go if I get out early for good behavior. That's a long time to think about your mistakes. I've been in therapy here, mandatory at first, but now I go voluntarily. My therapist makes me look at things I don't want to look at, like how I treated you, like the choices I made. I'm not going to say I understand why you turned me in. I'm not going to say I forgive you, but I'm starting to understand that this is my fault, not yours. Derek didn't force me to steal from you. He didn't force me to plan the fraud. He suggested it, and I agreed. I made those choices. I slapped you at my wedding, in front of everyone. I can't take that back. I can't undo any of it. I don't expect you to write back. I don't expect you to visit. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone better than who I was. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'm trying. Emily. I read that letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer with the others. Warden Delgado's advice echoes in my head. Take time. Don't rush. Let Emily work through her anger. Let yourself heal. I'm not ready to respond yet. Maybe I never will be. Maybe the relationship between Emily and me died in that courtroom 3 years ago, and no amount of apologies or reflection will resurrect it. Or maybe, someday, there will be room for something new. Not mother and daughter the way we were before. That's gone forever. But something else. 2 adults who share DNA and history and damage, trying to figure out if there's anything worth salvaging. But not today. Today I'm in my garden, harvesting the last of the summer tomatoes before the first frost hits. Cooper is lying in the shade of the apple tree, watching me work. The sun is warm on my shoulders, the earth cool under my knees. The tomatoes are perfect, heavy and red and ripe. I think about the past sometimes, but not as much as I used to. The wedding, the slap, the trial, Emily's screaming face as they dragged her from the courtroom. The memories are there, but they've lost their sharp edges. They're just facts now, things that happened, part of my history, but not my whole story. My phone rings. I almost ignore it, but I check the caller ID out of habit. Margaret Henderson, my lawyer. Margaret? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Janet. I'm calling with good news. Remember that civil suit we filed against Derek and Emily to recover your stolen funds? Yes? The court just awarded you a judgment. Full restitution of the $37,000 plus interest, court costs, and damages. Total of $53,000. I sit down hard on the garden bench. Where's that money supposed to come from? They're both in prison. Derek had some assets we were able to seize. The offshore accounts mostly. The FBI froze them during the investigation, and now they're being liquidated to pay restitution to victims. You're first in line. You should see the money in your account within 30 days. $53,000. Not everything I lost. Not even close when you factor in the years of free rent and the wedding costs. But something. Proof that justice, however imperfect, still exists. Thank you, Margaret. You earned it. Oh, and Janet? I'm glad things worked out for you. Not everyone has the courage to do what you did. After we hang up, I sit in the garden for a long time, watching Cooper chase butterflies, feeling the sun warm my face. $53,000. I'll put it in savings, let it sit there as a buffer against future emergencies. Or maybe I'll use some of it to build a greenhouse, extend the growing season, have fresh vegetables year-round. The possibilities feel good. I gather the harvested tomatoes in a basket and carry them inside. I'll make sauce tomorrow, fill mason jars, stock the pantry for winter. Simple, methodical work. The kind of thing that makes sense. As I'm washing the tomatoes, my phone buzzes with an email. The subject line catches my eye. Victim Impact Fund Distribution. I open it. It's from the FBI, Catherine Walsh, specifically. Dear Ms. Patterson, as part of the Sutherland fraud case, the FBI has recovered approximately $2 million in assets from various offshore accounts and shell companies. After legal fees and administrative costs, $1.6 million remains to be distributed among verified victims. You have been identified as the primary victim in this case. Based on documented losses and attempted fraud, you are entitled to 40% of the recovered funds. A check for $640,000 will be mailed to your address of record within 60 days. Additional victims will receive proportional distributions based on their documented losses. If you have any questions, please contact my office. Regards, Special Agent Catherine Walsh, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I read the email 3 times to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. $640,000, on top of the $53,000 from the civil suit. I sit down at my kitchen table, the tomatoes forgotten, and start laughing. Not happy laughter exactly, more like shock mixed with disbelief. After everything, after all the loss and pain and betrayal, I'm going to come out ahead financially. The universe has a strange sense of justice. I forward the email to Margaret, asking her to verify its legitimacy. She calls back within minutes. It's real, Janet. Congratulations. You're about to receive the largest victim restitution payment I've ever seen in a fraud case. What should I do with it? That's up to you. Pay off any remaining debts, invest it, donate it, blow it on a world cruise. It's your money. After we hang up, I walk back out to the garden. Cooper trots over, tail wagging, and I scratch behind his ears. $640,000. I think about Emily, sitting in her cell in FCI Dublin, 9 years left on her sentence. I think about Derek, rotting in whatever federal prison they sent him to, 35 years stretching ahead of him. And I think about me, standing in my garden with dirt under my fingernails and a dog at my feet and more money than I've ever had in my life. Emily tried to destroy me. She planned it carefully, executed it ruthlessly, and came very close to succeeding. If I hadn't discovered the truth, if I hadn't fought back, I'd be bankrupt and broken right now. Instead, I'm whole, better than whole. I'm free, free from Emily's manipulation, free from the constant enabling, free from the fear that saying no makes me a bad mother. I set boundaries, enforced consequences, and refused to be a victim. And now, I'm being rewarded for it. The irony is almost poetic. Emily's attempt to steal everything from me has resulted in me having more than I started with. Her greed, her crime, her calculated cruelty has backfired spectacularly. I won. Not in the way I expected, not through some dramatic confrontation or emotional reconciliation. I won by standing firm, by refusing to be destroyed, by choosing justice over family loyalty. I won by becoming someone Emily couldn't manipulate anymore. The sun is setting, painting the sky orange and purple. I gather the basket of tomatoes and head inside. Tomorrow, I'll make sauce. Next week, I'll talk to a financial advisor about investing the restitution money. Next month, I'll start planning a greenhouse. But tonight, I pour myself a glass of wine, sit on my back porch with Cooper at my feet, and toast the empty air. To revenge, I say quietly, and to justice, may they always be the same thing. The wine is good, the evening is peaceful. My house, my garden, my life, all exactly as I built them. And somewhere in a federal prison, my daughter sits in a cell, understanding far too late that actions have consequences and mothers have limits. She wanted my keys, my property, my money, my life. Instead, she got 12 years and a lesson she'll never forget. I sip my wine and smile.